Welcome, everybody. As people filter in, I'd like to start. I'm Jill Barshay at the Hechinger Report. We're an education news outlet based at Teachers College, Columbia University. And my boss made me promise to say, sign up for our free newsletters if you haven't already. I'd like to set the context with two very quick anecdotes. I'd like to tell you about Seth Weinberger. He used to be a corporate attorney, and he represented video game makers, the shoot 'em and kill 'em up kind. And he said, instead of using video games for evil, couldn't we teach children through games? And he spent 20 years inventing video games with academics, and he never got results. And then just before pandemic, he decided to add human tutoring to it, and suddenly his video games started to work. And there was just recently, last month, a study out of Stanford University showing just how effective it is when you combine the ed tech with the human tutors. The second story I'm going to tell you was about the late Bob Slavin at Johns Hopkins University. He thought, why don't I create a school improvement program that uses all the best evidence from research? So he created a giant stew of all the best things, collaborative learning, phonics, everything. And initially, the study showed promise. But then as he got grants from the Department of Education to study it at scale, he didn't get great results. And his school system, which had been very popular, I mean, PBS, everyone was writing about it and airing stories about it, started to fall out of favor. And he was disappointed, and he pored over the data, and he realized part of the problem was that they didn't always implement the tutoring. And the kids who weren't doing my program, sometimes they were doing the tutoring, and this light went off in his head around 2018. The way to help underprivileged children who are the most behind is human tutoring, that maybe this is the key to everything. And so I, as an education reporter who covers research, this was all coalescing before the pandemic. And when the pandemic happened, I realized that my mission as a journalist was to be covering this. And so I'm really grateful to be on a stage with people who are inventing and bringing K-12 tutoring at scale. And so I just, as a way of introducing our panelists, I wanted just one at a time for them to quickly show you all the different varieties and flavors of tutoring that we have right on this panel. And there's one-to-one, there's online, there's in-person, there's during the school day, there's after the school day, having your own curriculum, using the school's curriculum. I mean, it's everything. And so I'll just start here to my left with Courtney Lewis, who's the Vice President of Tutoring at Carnegie Learning, which had been known for intelligent tutoring systems and is now getting involved in the tutoring business. What is your flavor?
Well, thank you, Jill. I appreciate that. So our flavor is online, and we focus on hiring and using certified teachers as our tutors. We provide online tutoring in mathematics as well as the ELA. We focus on supporting students K-12. We do small groups. We do online, not just online, one-on-one homework help, but our biggest demand is at the small group level, and we have been able to grow exponentially, I should say, in a short amount of time.
Great. Rahul, Kalita, you're the co-founder of Tutored by Teachers. What's your flavor?
Yeah, we're completely virtual, only with certified teachers. It's consistent. You're getting the same teacher with the same group of kids, and it's scheduled during the school day or after school. We prefer doing it on site, but we can also do it at home. And we focus on outcomes.
Shashank Singhal, you're at, should I say Filo or Ask Filo?
It's Filo.
Filo, thank you. I apologize. Filo,
No worries.
Tell us about your tutoring.
Yes. So Filo is an on-demand tutoring platform. We are completely online. We connect students to a tutor, live tutor, within 60 seconds over a video and audio call, and we are available 24/7 for the students.
So that's the on-demand kind. Justin Serrano, you are the founder and CEO of Littera Education. Tell us about your tutoring.
Yeah, so we basically work back from outcomes and say, okay, well, we know what works. We think it's really hard to do. So we have three pieces. One is a platform that helps basically customize, take the work out, get data out of it. We have curriculum integration, so districts can choose what curriculum makes most sense that's coherent to their model. And then staffing, also, districts can choose. So if they have resources or if there's nonprofit or other ways to staff it, we can support that. And then we also have virtual tutors where that's not the case.
So it's two things. It's a platform for other tutoring organizations, and
Correct.
you do your own tutoring.
Yep.
Meisha Porter, you're the former chancellor of the New York City Public Schools and the president and CEO of the Bronx Community Foundation, but you're also involved in tutoring with Move to Learn. Can you please tell us about your flavor?
So Move to Learn's flavor is online, but also supporting teachers. But Meisha's flavor is about connecting and building partnerships with school districts to design systems that work for them.
Thank you. Now that we've introduced the panelists, I'd like to learn a little bit of who's in the audience. Could you raise your hand if you're a school administrator? Thank you. How many people here are a vendor or a startup? Great. What about nonprofit organizations and investors? No.
Everybody, get him.
So I think this is a good way to start the more substantive questions. I'd like our panelists, and I'm going to go in a different order, to think about there are a lot of problems and challenges with tutoring, from scheduling, bringing adults in the building, getting the ed tech to work. It goes on and on and on. And so I was hoping that our panelists could share with us one problem that they've had during pandemic that they've overcome, and a challenge that they're still working with. And Justin, can I start with you?
Sure. Yeah. I think I think we focus a lot on implementation. So I think in some respects, the easier to implement models are the ones that tend to work maybe the least well. So if you're trying to address, students who are really struggling, maybe they were already struggling, but are maybe even struggling more as a result of the pandemic, there's a model that has to work for that. But that model involves scheduling during the school day, logistics, consistent tutors. That's what's going to work. I think the challenges are maybe obvious there because they're also running school, right? So that's not the only thing they're doing all day. So I think one of the areas that I wouldn't say we've solved, but where I think we've made a lot of progress is to be able to flex the staffing model. So in some places we work, they have folks that will do in person. So our platform supports in-person tutoring as well, even though it's an online platform. But maybe they don't have everybody. So maybe they want to serve 200 kids and they have enough staff to serve 50. That's where we can wrap around virtual tutoring support. So we kind of meet them where they are. That's also the biggest cost driver for tutoring programs. So we work with a nonprofit in North Carolina that serves 27 districts, and they're placing, again, in-person, on-site tutors. We're the platform that helps them do that. So I think, in a lot of ways, I think the human resource challenge is both, it's the most expensive part of the equation. It's also, in a lot of cases, the scarcest resource, and I think that's where our flexibility, at least, has taken us some steps in the right direction.
Courtney, can you tell us about one of the biggest challenges you're facing?
For us, I think the biggest challenge is really being able to reach more students. Looking at some of the research, they're talking about the U.S. Department of Education says we're reaching about 10% of the student population with tutoring right now. How do we get more students to participate? How do we continue to collaborate with more schools and districts, use the flexibility in the programs that we have to bring in more students, to have them participate? Because we know that when students are involved in education, when they're involved in tutoring, you see a positive impact in their results. So for us, it's about how do we build a program that's flexible enough to go into the school, whether it's before school, after school, or even during school, and reach as many kids as possible. And one of the ways we do it, as I just mentioned, was our flexibility, putting together a program by sitting down with school districts. What are your needs? What's your target population? What resources do you use? What's your curriculum? How do we align our high-quality instructional resources to meet your demands and your needs? So
that's quite interesting, because your company was previously known as having its own curriculum, and it was a good curriculum, but now you're saying you're changing the curriculum by school.
No, what we're seeing is we know what the standards are for instruction, and we take our curriculum, we take the school district's scope and sequence, and we align the two. So we're able to use our high quality instructional resources, but again, we may show some flexibility in the way, the order in which we present the concepts to meet the students' needs, but they are getting access to high-quality instructional resources from us, as well as our AI software.
Shashank, tell us about some of the challenges that you're overcoming.
So I think one very important thing that we focus on is demonstrating impact in all our projects, right? How is the intervention that Filo is able to provide across all our projects leading to real learning outcome impact as we go forward? And what we thought really hard about this and understood that why is it that we are limiting impact with some studies that we do or some research work that we do for very few projects which are going on. Why not make it an ongoing impact assessment? Why not implement impact assessment with each and every project, as well as we should not wait till the end of the semester or till the end of the year to identify whether there has been any positive outcome for the students who are part of this implementation, and get to an ongoing impact, ongoing sort of a journey in terms of a student's improvement after benefiting from Filo's intervention or any high-dosage tutoring intervention. Making sure that this system exists was a big problem, because an ongoing journey in terms of improvement is something that we need to establish, especially for on-demand tutoring, in a more robust way. We were able to do it with some projects. Now we are making sure that we do it for all our projects and make sure we have a clear graph to identify which student is where during their journey within a semester, within an academic year.
Meisha, what do you see as some challenges right now in tutoring?
The biggest challenge is time. I mean, I think what we know what works well is when young people connect one-on-one with an educator. We know what works well is small group instruction, right? Like, we know the things that work well. And when school districts are competing for time with so many different interests, then that becomes the biggest, lever for impacting change. I think what, we're thinking about at Cognamoves is not just how do we kind of fit ourselves in, but I think you talked about it. How do we partner with schools and districts to say, how do we help you understand what this technology can do? And how do we partner around its implementation in a way that's meaningful? Often teachers grapple with leveraging tools because they don't know what the outcome is going to be, right? And how it's going to impact what students experience in their learning spaces. And so I think, as we grapple with how much time there is in a day, and as school districts challenge competing competencies, time is always the greatest challenger. And as all of these folks are thinking about how you build these tools, the greatest thing you can build is a relationship around how you partner the technology, the time, and the tool with the human-centered experience that you want young people to have.
Right. In my reporting, I see that schools that already have an intervention block, it's easiest for them to bring the tutoring in, and ones that don't have that built into the schedule, they don't know where to fit it in.
Right.
Right. Rahul, tell us about the challenges in your model.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have solved the scaling issue for districts, and we're very deliberate in the approach when we work with a district. We crawl, walk, run with them. So we start with a couple of sites, we see what's working, we customize to the bell schedule of that particular school, meet the needs of those particular kids that we're serving. We demonstrate the results, we show the outcomes. And then the school, usually it's like the chief of schools will think about how do we make this serve more kids in the district. And so then we start thinking about serving the turnaround schools as an example. And now next year we'll be serving the entire school district across those schools.
Can you tell us about a tweak that you've made when you're starting with a small pilot like that, and then give us an example of a change?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree that after school tutoring, the attendance isn't as good, the engagement isn't as good. And so in some early pilots, we saw that The attendance was quite low in after-school tutoring, and so we quickly got together with the principal and we figured out how can we bring this into the school day. And then we saw attendance that looks like school attendance.
Is there another tweak someone would like to share that you've made?
I can share one, very similar to what Rahul said. You're looking at the first couple of weeks of participation in an online tutoring program, and you notice again, there's attendance peaks and valleys. So that's telling you there are certain times during the period that you have for tutoring where students are not available. And there are certain times where they are available. So one of the things that we did, we adjusted our schedule based on where those peaks and valleys were. We adjusted the staffing model to support if more students are available from 5 to 6 p.m. for online tutoring. That's when we had more tutors available. That's when we had more sessions available. So again, it's taking that try and error type of approach, monitoring your results, monitoring your outcomes, and making the adjustments when and where they're needed. That flexibility is so important.
Efficacy. How do we know we're actually helping children catch up? I'm curious to hear from our panelists if you're using outside metrics, if you're having outside researchers, and how you're proving that this is working. Shashank, you started to talk about this real-time measurement rather than waiting for, say, the spring assessments. Tell us about this metric that you're using, and is it objective?
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the most important questions that I think is going on in everyone's mind. And rightly so. We all need to think about if we are asking students to invest their time, we are asking administrators to invest resources, is it actually effective? So we strongly believe that it's very important to link any intervention with efficacy, with outcomes, whatever form of outcomes those are. And yes, we are working with outside partners who are objectively measuring these impact and learning outcomes. The only limitation that becomes there is then that becomes a semester-oriented or academic year-oriented assessment, which we end up doing. We would want to take it even further. In an ideal world, I would want to rate or assess each and every session that we have completed with that particular student in terms of outcome. Was that session effective at all? Was that something that a student helped? And we are working, that's the thing that I mentioned, right? We are taking it to that level of granularity that we can assess each and every session which students are completing. But having said that, now what we have done is we have started working with the school administrators who are along with the implementation, right? I think Rahul mentioned that implementation, working with school districts is important. Similarly, in terms of impact assessment and ongoing impact assessment, it's important to work together with school administrators, with people who are there, and working with students during classrooms and figure out a model where we can leverage their interaction with the students and leverage and objectively measure that during the entire semester.
Justin, your organization is noteworthy for bringing in lots of outside researchers that you're working with. Can you share with the audience about some of these studies?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things about it. One is we don't build our own assessments. We try and plug into resources that are there. So any efficacy we're looking at in a typical program, it's kind of around two things. One is what assessment are they using, benchmark to benchmark, that's sort of the most typical, so that A, all the kids are taking the same assessment, and you can look at them versus the kids who are in the group, and there's no additional assessment required, which is important. And the other is what I would call sort of executional efficacy. Like along the way, if the program is designed a certain way and it's not happening that way, you can be pretty confident you're not going to get the outcomes that you're expecting either. So that's the other way we look at. It's not an academic efficacy sort of number, but it's more around implementation. Is it happening? And if it's not, to Rahul's point earlier, how do you tweak it? The outside research we're doing, I mean, just to be honest, I don't think we need another study about high-impact tutoring working, right? So let's put that aside. There's a lot of research going on about, like, is high-impact tutoring working, but it is, right? So let's put that aside. I think the online version of it is like an iterative version of that same research. So the research we're doing, it was a Gates Foundation grant. We're working with Renaissance and Annenberg. So the kind of research that we're looking at is cost-benefit. So If you run the same high-impact model with 1-on-1 versus 1-on-3, virtual, using existing curriculum and assessment, what's the relative outcomes of that? Because I think the end game is how can you do this more cost effectively, because you're going to need to if it's going to be sustained, even if you can plug it into school day. So the notion is, can you start running experiments around, ratio is a huge cross driver. What's the tutor profile? If it's a certified teacher, is it a volunteer, is it a college kid? Like, those are the kinds of research that we're starting to work on that'll help administrators make smart decisions that may not be one size fits all. Well, some students, maybe there is a relative benefit to one-on-one, and maybe some students need that, and maybe I can serve 3 times as many kids because I can be confident that if I run this model, I'm going to get really good outcomes with it. I think that's where it has to head, and we're starting down that road with the research we're doing.
Who else has research? Courtney, do you have research going on right now?
Absolutely. So Carnegie Learning is really based off of initial research on our instructional resources as well as our AI software out of Carnegie Mellon University. Right now with tutoring, we're focusing on what are the ways that we can scale tutoring at an affordable level using AI software, and to what extent do we also grab and use our live tutors as a part of this. Does every student need a live tutoring session online every day, 3 times a day? Or is there a nice mixture between the use of AI software as well as live tutoring to maximize your resources and get the best results that kids need when they need it? So that's what we're working on. We have a grant with Levi, a Levi grant study that we're working on.
What is Levi?
Sorry. Levi is,
Never mind. Don't.
put me on the spot here. It's an acronym, and
It's not
remember
genes.
right now. It's not genes. But we are partnered with Carnegie Mellon University, Stanford University, and we are exploring what are the different mixes of tutoring, whether it is with artificial intelligence, whether it's a live tutor online that can be used again to make sure we're maximizing the results and helping students to learn at the highest rate possible.
Great. Rahul, your version of tutoring has been basically studied. The difference is that you have certified teachers and you're doing it over a video screen instead of in person. Are you involved in research of your model?
Yeah, in the fall, we'll be running a RCT with Stanford. But in the meantime, we're capturing a ton of data. We do pre-post assessments for the kids, and then we do informal exit tickets in every session, and we also capture engagement metrics from the teacher tutors as well. And so that's our internal data, and then to Justin's point, we also leverage what the school is using in terms of data. So we just got some pretty exciting results out of Indianapolis. We saw double-digit gains on NWA MAP scores. And so we were actually able to move the kids in these turnaround schools to above the national average in math.
Meisha, what is your thoughts about outside objective research?
So, I think there are a couple of things. I think you have to use the measures that schools use to understand whether the practices are working, right? And I think we have to challenge what we actually want tutoring to do, right? We know that there were learning gaps that existed pre-pandemic. Those gaps were exacerbated by the pandemic. And so I think the bigger question is, what do we want to solve with tutoring, right? Do we want to solve the problem we had before that we actually see in a bigger way now, or do we want to solve a problem in a moment? And I think what the outside research can tell us is which problem we're actually solving, and how do we, continue to partner with districts, leverage their assessments to begin to tell a story in a school, in a district, in a state around what the impact is of the resources that are coming in and partnering with them.
I'm thinking how research needs to clarify their questions a little bit more.
Absolutely, yeah. I want to challenge every question. Sorry, y'all invited me. But I want to challenge every question that we ask with how does it live in a school? How does it live in a system? And how do you wrap yourself around that system in support of, as opposed to, from a practitioner perspective, often asking the school to adjust. So I'm inspired by the conversation of, we want to partner with schools. We want to think about how we work together to fit it in a day. We want to think about how we leverage their assessments to tell them the story that they want to understand of the impact of leveraging multiple modes of tutoring platforms. The question of, like, every kid doesn't need the same thing every day, right? There are different needs. And so I think those are important research questions for us to be asking in order to service districts effectively.
We're at an investor conference. This is not the American Educational Research Association, so let's talk about money. And I'm always amazed that so many people think they can make money off of K-12 education. I'm really curious with tutoring where the money is here. And I wanted to ask first of all, just a show of hands, who is a for-profit company? Okay, and who is a nonprofit tutoring? Is the organization?
I'm me, yes. So we are Cognimus is a for-profit company that I'm advising, but I am an educator.
Okay, great. So everyone thinks they're going to make money out of this, right? And so
No,
I'm
I don't think so.
And so I wanted to hear from the panelists, are there really profits to be made? And can cost-effective tutoring be academically effective? And because I think tutoring on the cheap is tough. And so I'd like to start with Justin on your money thoughts.
Well, the one investor in the room is mine, so I'm going to say yes. Pat, that was for you. No, I think, there tends to be an assumption that there's a tension between outcomes and profit. I don't think that has to be there, and I think there are plenty of examples where it's not. I think the more and more that outcomes-based whatever really becomes the economic model, then the companies that deserve to make the money because they're helping districts get the outcomes for their kids should make money because you're paying for outcomes at that point. You're not paying for hours, you're not paying for software, you're paying for outcomes that you intentionally went after to get. So tutoring on the cheap, I think what we have right now is a very inexpensive model that actually is built around non-use. The economics of those models only work if no one uses it.
And then we can just pause. There are these models that are 24/7 on demand where in some school districts, fewer than 1% of the kids ever log into it.
I think both ends of the spectrum are very intuitive. So if you're charging $25 a year, you can assure that tutoring can't be delivered because you can't afford to do that. On the other side, you have research like Saga, which has shown tremendous results, but are also very intensive and very expensive. And again, it makes sense. If I have that kind of experience with a tutor over the course of a year, you're going to see those results.
$4,000 a kid in some cases.
So I think the question is, what's in between those two things, right? And I think that's what's exciting. I think that's where the combination, of software and live tutoring, but not in a kind of blind way, but like in a very targeted way, starting to optimize. I think the human has to be there, just my own personal bias, because I think I have kids. I think they relate better to humans than chat, but especially my 5-year-old. But there is a lot in between there, and I think that's where it's like, okay, no dosage, or here, take a gallon of Advil. It's going to work for you, but maybe 2 tablets. So where's the 2 tablets? Like that's what I think we really need to find. I think there's a lot of promise in a combination of technology and humans that can get there.
Shashank, yours seems like potentially very profitable, right? Because it's a text chat system.
It's an audio-video call on which a student can connect to a tutor live.
Well, okay, so you're seeing the tutor.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Maybe I'll pick that thread up because I think Justin also referred to some of these cost effectiveness, right? And it's important for us to again look at what are we trying to achieve from tutoring, right? What is it that tutoring stands for? Are we saying that tutoring is a replacement or is an extension of schools? It's not. Let's be honest. Otherwise, we'll have to have an education budget to replicate what we are doing. So it cannot be a replica or it cannot be a simple extension of schools or school classroom. It's important that we take the lead from the school ecosystem and then figure out what each and every student needs. So how many times, I'll ask this, how many times since you are an educator, has it happened that a student is able to understand something within 10 to 15 minutes of your interaction?
It depends on the teacher.
But does it happen?
Absolutely,
It happens,
yes.
right? Why is it that we are measuring tutoring in hours? Why is it that we are so bound with a particular structure, which is making it cost ineffective? I think everyone here agrees that there is some level of ineffectiveness which exists in the system, and we need to solve for it. So tutoring as a complementary tool
Yes.
to school education ecosystem,
Yep.
not a replacement or not a extension of it,
Yes.
can work cost effectively, and which is important. And that's why it's important to think about it with an open mind and not just, this is, because it's obvious. If 3 or 4 students are, and Justin mentioned that we all agree high-dosage tutoring has impact.
Great.
And it's obvious as well, if you're learning in a group of 3, 4, it will be effective.
Right.
But can we deliver it at scale? Can we make sure that it's cost effective and goes on in an impactful manner?
Rahul, you seem to have one of the most expensive models on the stage. You have certified teachers. I don't know how much you need to pay them an hour. How do you make money doing that?
Justin was talking about the ratios, and so our hypothesis is that with a highly qualified teacher, you can have a bit of a higher ratio, so we go up to 5. And so I actually think our model is quite cost effective. Per hour, per student, it's sub $20. And the last thing I'll say on this is our tutoring costs roughly 7% of the annual expenditure of the average student in a given year, which I think is actually not that bad. And it's far cheaper than a Saga, and it's cheaper than a text-based solution per hour too, because those usage rates are so low. So our economics, I think, are favorable based on that ratio.
I spoke with a startup today who said he was going to pay $180 for each tutor, but each tutor he hoped would work with 30 students at a time. See how that goes. Courtney, tell us about how you expect to make profits with tutoring.
So again, our model is very similar in that we use certified teachers, so we do charge at a higher rate, but we are also able to support a larger class size, a larger session size. So
How large?
Up to 8 students in one session, and we see results. Our results from year 1 to year 2 in terms of student growth is double, but we're able to reach out and reach more students and support more students with our program.
And is that because they're using your intelligent tutoring system simultaneously while working with the tutor?
There's a combination. That's because we have certified teachers who are part of the program. So we're talking about teachers who are used to working with groups of 30 students, even online. And now they have a group of 8, and that's very manageable. But you couple that with the software, with the additional practice and instruction, and again, you see those results.
So right now, schools have $122 billion to spend on tutoring and other things like football stadiums and AC systems. But as we know, that's all ending in 2024. And I'm really curious what the members of our panel think tutoring will look like when we're on the other side of that fiscal cliff and schools no longer have easy money to spend on all of this. I'd like to start with Rahul this time.
Yeah, I think that pre-pandemic, a lot of districts were already implementing high-dosage tutoring. I think this particular moment has allowed for more districts to try and see what works. And so I think what you'll see is more districts will add intervention blocks into the day, and you'll see more small group high-dosage tutoring happening in a lot of districts that are looking to drive outcomes.
Meisha, how do you see tutoring afterwards?
I agree. I think that schools will have partnered with organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, that will have demonstrated outcomes, and leaders will make decisions around how that impacted student learning in their building. And I think if the costs and the outcomes match, I think school systems will continue to invest. I think, what we know is families that can afford tutors pay upwards of $100 and beyond per hour for a tutor for their children. And so I think if school systems see the same level of impact, then they will see that as a part of an intervention block. I think if families are part of the conversation, they will get their kids to log on when they leave the school building because they'll see the impact of the investment. And so I think that this is a moment to demonstrate, right, and to leverage research to tell the story of impact. And I think that there is a story beyond this moment.
Justin, how do you see tutoring? And I'm curious, picking up on what Meisha says about, are you seeing that parents are supportive and want their kids to get this tutoring? Or do you see that they're concerned that it's a sign that their child's behind and that they see it as a disgrace?
Yeah, I think tutoring is becoming a part of school, and I think that's what addresses that. So kids, if everyone's getting something, not all tutoring, but they're basically getting what they need in a variety of forms, I think then the stigma starts to go away. I think in a lot of ways, tutoring is not going to be called tutoring anymore. It's going to be this way of doing intervention that's going to be very effective, that's going to use maybe some of the same products that are intervention products with tutoring wrap around it, which is what we do. But I think that's part of what's happening. I'm pretty optimistic that that's happening. The other is alternative staffing models. So I think one place where I would diverge with Rahul and Courtney is certified teachers play an important role in teaching. However, there's a lot of evidence that tutors can be a much broader brush. So with the right data and the right content, a student in college in a teaching program or in some cases a volunteer, depending on what they're teaching, they can be a very effective tutor because if they're good at engaging with the student and delivering content, then they're going to get good results. And I think that has the promise of, again, how do you drive down the cost, but also open up the funnel of capacity, like who can actually do the work. And I think you see a lot of nonprofits, state departments, cities themselves standing up these alternative staffing models, and they're going to need to sort of get to the capacity that they need to support students beyond the cliff.
Shashank, if you can somewhat briefly give us your vision for tutoring after the fiscal cliff.
Yes, absolutely. I think this, with COVID and with this ASU funding, it gave an opportunity to invest in a new concept or in a concept at scale, which has proven impact. There's one more dimension in which this investment has been made. This investment has also helped schools identify where this is most needed as well as most helpful. Now, taking lead from that will help schools identify where to prudently invest their funds, budgets. So that is also an outcome till 2024, that we identify where is the right need as well as benefit of investing this. Second, we also need to realize, right, there is a potential of understanding which budget is effective, which budget is not effective, of what spend is effective, what's not, and then prioritize accordingly. If this is something that we all agree upon is helpful, then we need to make sure that we continue providing this support and find.
Right, if the outcomes are there, yes.
Absolutely.
Courtney, what is your vision for it?
So again, it's the lessons learned during this time, right? We know what high quality, we know what effective tutoring is, right? So what I see happening is that beyond this, we'll continue implementing those lessons learned, but with understanding that there's a variety of needs of students, and we can address their needs in a variety of different ways. So it's not just everyone gets the same thing at the same time in the same way.
Let me ask it a little differently. There's probably more than 100 tutoring companies right now, maybe more than, I mean, how many tutoring companies do you think there are right now? 500? I don't know the answer to it. There's a lot. I mean, how many tutoring companies do you think there's going to be in 2025?
The ones that have
Fewer.
outcomes.
No, I think that there's going to be fewer. Outcomes are going to win. Yes. And then there may be opportunities for consolidation. So from an industry standpoint, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some M&A activity because maybe someone's built a good product or maybe someone's built a good component, and that's where potentially some consolidation could also happen.
Well, I apologize to the audience because I hogged up all the question time, and I see the counter going, the space shuttle is going to take off, 10, 9. I'm sure some of you would like to have conversations with some of the heads of these tutoring companies, and we'll be out in the hallway here. They asked us to leave so that the next session can come right in. But I want to thank you and thank our panelists for this session.